Welcome to the URI pre-departure session on travel logistics. Preparing to go abroad is an exciting time. There's a lot to think about and lots of planning to do. Let's talk about packing. Consider packing as lightly as possible. You will probably buy some items abroad and maybe some souvenirs. Don't overpack or you won't have space to bring anything home. Or it is very likely you'll be paying some hefty overweight baggage or shipping fees. You may also be planning to do some personal travel while abroad. Many of the low-cost and budget airlines have limits on baggage size and weight. If you are traveling by train or bus, know that you will have to carry your luggage from place to place, and, depending on where you are, not all locations have elevators readily available. Sometimes students find that it is helpful to have an extra small bag that they can use for shorter trips, as long as they have a safe and secure location to house their other belongings while on their personal travels. We recommend leaving all your valuable and irreplaceable items at home. Consider the various climates that you might be traveling to. Will you be there long enough for the change of season? Do you anticipate traveling to multiple locations, and what will the seasons be in those locations? Layers are great. Packing clothes that can be worn in multiple situations or layered on top of each other, depending on the temperature, is always a good option. Consider packing fabrics that are easy to wash and require minimal ironing. Depending on where you are going, the cost of doing laundry can be rather expensive. If you are in a homestay, the cost of doing laundry may be included, but if you are in an apartment setting or dormitory, you may need to hand wash or use a laundromat. Be as practical as you can and think about whether or not you're going to actually need the items that you're planning on bringing with you. If you're not going to a remote location, many of the items that you might consider bringing are likely items that can be purchased overseas. Toiletries and personal care items like shampoo, toothpaste, etc. are readily accessible in most overseas locations. Sometimes, if you have a preferred name brand item, like Tylenol, that might be difficult for you to find overseas, you might want to bring a bottle of that. Be practical. Don't pack an overabundance of things that you can purchase while you're abroad. You also want to be practical in terms of the clothing that you pack. Are you packing an item that you're going to be wearing more than once or twice? Plan to have a carry-on bag and to use it wisely. There is always the possibility that your checked bag or bags will be delayed or lost. Make certain you bring any of your medication that you might need. It is not advisable to pack medicine in a checked bag. Medication sometimes needs to be kept at a certain temperature or needs to be taken at a certain time of day, and you want to make sure that you have access to any items you might need. In some cases, you may actually need a doctor's note to carry your particular medication. It's not a bad idea to have copies of your prescriptions on hand as well. In my case, I have a nut allergy and I have to travel with a note from my doctor authorizing me to carry an EpiPen through security, since it's a sharp object. You should also bring a change of clothing, an extra pair of glasses or contacts if you wear them, a toothbrush, and copies of all your important documents in your carry-on bag. Consider weighing your luggage before you get to the airport, because the overweight charges for baggage can be very pricey. If you're bringing an overweight bag with you when you depart, then you're not leaving yourself space to bring anything additional back with you. Check the policies of the airline that you're flying and find out how many bags you can check and what the weight and size restrictions are for baggage. Considerations regarding communications and money. Another thing that you'll want to think about in terms of the logistics as you plan for study abroad are both your ability to communicate with back home and how you'll access money overseas. The availability of Wi-Fi access, mobile phone coverage, ATMs, and banks will vary depending on where you're going, but in most locations that students study abroad, there is a wide availability for all of these things. Check with your program provider or host university to find out what level of accessibility will be available to you. Take a look at your electronics. Do you need travel adapters or voltage converters in order to utilize any of your electronic and electrical devices that you might be looking to bring with you? In determining what access you'll have, To retrieving your money overseas, it will be helpful to reach out to your own bank to find out whether or not they have any overseas branches. It's okay if they don't, but you will want to make sure to find out if the current ATM card that you have has any international fees associated with it in addition to the regular withdrawal fees. It may be worth looking into larger banks that have international locations or are part of a global alliance with banks in other countries, because sometimes they will waive or have discounted fees if you use some of their own or partner ATMs or branches overseas. Take a look at what the pros and cons of these arrangements are for your personal situation. It is okay to use a bank that is not part of one of these alliances, but do make sure to keep in mind that every time you take money out at an international ATM, they may charge you an additional fee on top of the regular ATM charge. As such, it is best not to withdraw small sums such as $20, but instead plan ahead and take out a sizable enough amount of money that it makes sense to pay this fee. The other thing to consider as well is make sure that you have an ATM card with a chip. While this is commonplace now in the United States, this was readily used in many international locations before it even became widely used here. Most locations are going to expect that you have a chip in both your ATM card and your credit card. Make sure that you have a PIN or personal identification number available as well. It is very important that you contact both your bank as well as your credit cards prior to going overseas. Notify them of the location or locations you will be traveling to abroad and the time frame that you'll be gone. Then, as you're abroad, if you do decide that you are going to be traveling to any other locations, it's important to inform your bank and your credit card companies again of the itinerary changes. Many of them do have international numbers that you can use to call them collect, or they may have a way for you to contact them through your online account. It is important for them to know about where you will be using your cards because they monitor usage. If you are traveling to France and they are expecting that you're in Kingston, Rhode Island, and they all of a sudden see charges in Paris, they may think they are fraudulent charges and put a hold on your account until they can verify them with you. So, to avoid having your accounts frozen unnecessarily, keep your financial institutions informed of your plans. Many times students inquire about exchanging money in advance. Certainly having cash on hand is useful. You can exchange currency in advance at many banks in the US or at an international airport. If you choose to do this, we recommend exchanging a smaller amount of money, perhaps enough to get you through your first day or two in country. It is better not to rely solely on exchanging US dollars because typically you will get the best exchange rate using your ATM or credit cards. You might be wondering about cell phones overseas. If you are studying away through a third-party provider, reach out to them to find out whether it makes sense to utilize an international plan through your US provider or simply to purchase a new phone or new SIM card for your phone. If you are studying as a bilateral exchange student, reach out to the International Student Office at your host university for advice. Sometimes the location or locations that you will be traveling to and the length of your intended stay will dictate which option makes the most sense. There are also several apps with which you're probably already very familiar that people utilize to keep connected internationally. WhatsApp, Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, Facebook Messenger, iMessage are all things students have reported using. Investigate those options and figure out what works for you. Communicating with friends and family back in the States has become incredibly easy. It's important to think about how frequently you want to have that communication and to discuss this in advance with your family and friends. While you may normally connect with friends and family several times a day or several times a week, consider whether doing so will hinder you from immersing yourself in your new culture and getting the full study abroad experience. We find that students that remain in constant contact with friends and family back home oftentimes have a harder time acclimating to their host country. Consider letting friends and family know that you will connect with them when you arrive in country to let them know that you are safe, but also establish a schedule of future contact that will allow you to also make the most of your study abroad experience. Maybe you connect twice a week instead of every day or something like that. In some instances, the time zone difference of 12 or 13 hours will make such planning essential. Let's talk finances while abroad. Hopefully, part of your planning process for your study abroad experience included thinking about your spending budget for your time abroad. It is not too late to double check with your program or with your host university as to what the fees that you're paying cover. For some programs, your fees might be covering just the tuition, or sometimes tuition, room, and board, and some excursions might be covered. Is the cost of Wi-Fi access included in your housing fee? Do you have access to laundry facilities, and are they at an additional expense? Is a cell phone and data plan part of your program package, or have you budgeted to pay for this when you arrive? In many cases, you'll do some travel on your own, and so you should plan for those travel, lodging, and meal expenses. Are your meals included as part of your program fees, or are you buying food and making it yourself in an apartment setting? Has a subway or bus pass been included in your program fees, or will you be paying for those expenses? Or are you in a location that is walking distance from your classes? Are there any books and supplies that you have to purchase? In many locations, you'll find that the cost of textbooks is much less than what you would pay here at URI. But if they're not included, that might be an additional expense for you. So what are your important documents? We mentioned earlier that you should pack copies of your important documents in your carry-on. What should you consider an important document? Your passport, your visa, if applicable, and this would be found inside your passport, your admission letter to the program or host university, your ID cards, your credit cards. You should make copies of both the front and back, as well as the front and back of any ATM cards, your medical insurance cards, your prescriptions, your travel insurance information, and while not required, if you do have any extra passport photos, it's helpful to bring those with you. It's possible upon arrival you may be asked to create an additional student ID and asked for a passport-sized photo. It's also helpful to leave a copy of all of these important documents with a parent or guardian, or have e-copies available to you in a secure cloud storage, so that if for some reason when you're traveling and you don't have a copy of your documents with you, someone back home would have these readily accessible, or you could download them yourself. Thank you for viewing this pre-departure orientation module. We hope that you have found it helpful. If you have not done so already, please remember to review the remaining pre-departure orientation modules in the pre-departure section of our YouTube account as they pertain to your specific program. As always, remember to contact us with any questions or concerns that you may have.